Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because you need to master the absolute foundations of medical science. Whether you're a student, prepping for a core A&P course, or maybe you're an educational content creator who needs to find the best, most comprehensive material out there.
Exactly. And this isn't just about memorizing a bunch of terms. It's about really understanding the blueprint of the human body.
Its structure, its function.
And critically, how it all maintains stability. We're going to be taking a deep dive into the foundational chapters of a really robust A&P study guide.
Right.
Distilling those core concepts: organization, homeostasis, chemistry, and cellular function. Look, mastering these fundamentals is really the only path to advanced understanding and quality healthcare practice.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Before we even touch the science, let's talk strategy.
Yeah.
Because one of the most critical aspects of this resource is the structure itself.
Yes.
It's just designed to optimize learning. If you're building educational content for someone, the scaffolding here is...
It's just genius. It truly is. The goal is what we'd call targeted remediation. So each chapter starts with the concise concept overview, but the real power is in the testing.
It's not just multiple choice.
No, not at all. It moves way beyond that to include labeling, matching, short answers, and even these specialized clinical challenges. It forces you to recall information in multiple ways.
Which strengthens memory retention, right?
Lovely. And that immediate feedback loop is crucial.
That's what I was going to say. If you miss a question, the answers reference directly back to a specific text page. That functionality is key because it just stops that generalized, I'll just reread the whole chapter kind of studying.
Right. It forces you to accurately identify and then repair your area of weakness, like right away. No more guessing.
That speed is so important.
It is. And for content creators specifically, the resource offers tools like the One Last Quick Check mini tests.
Okay.
These are strategically positioned for a final review, but only after you're supposed to have mastered the topic. It provides a kind of high-stakes final check.
I also found the vocabulary exercises really interesting. The structure actually promotes scientific literacy outside of just, memorizing definitions.
It does. The crossword puzzles, for instance, they aren't just filler.
Right.
They specifically use vocabulary from these dedicated language of science and language of medicine sections. This makes sure that you're not just recalling the term, but you're practicing proper spelling and professional usage.
Which is surprisingly important in the field.
Incredibly important. Okay, so that's a really tactical approach. Let's transition into the actual content, starting with Chapter 1, the organization of the body.
So the study of anatomy and physiology. It really involves two distinct but intertwined ideas. Structure, which is anatomy, and function, physiology.
And how that relationship between the parts defines the whole organism. We have to emphasize that anatomy is the investigation of human structure.
Traditionally, through things like dissection.
Right, but also modern imaging techniques now. And we look at that structure through this lens of hierarchy. We move from the smallest units, the chemical and cellular parts, all the way up to the largest and most complex level, the organ system.
And if we zoom in on those smallest structural units, the cells, we find things like the mitochondria, the Golgi apparatus.
And the endoplasmic reticulum,
Know those.
Those are all classic examples of organelles. Think of them as the specialized functional components within the cell itself.
The little organs of the cell.
Exactly. And crucially, as we describe where all these things are, we rely on one non-negotiable standard: the anatomical position.
Ah, yes, the reference point.
The one and only reference point. Body erect, arms at the sides, palms forward. It allows us to accurately describe planes or regions no matter how the body is actually positioned.
That standardization is why medical communication can be so precise.
Absolutely.
Let's talk application for a second. We tend to think of systems in isolation, but they're always collaborating. So for fundamental tasks like, say, support and movement, what systems are required?
For support and movement, you need the precise synergy of the skeletal and muscular systems.
Okay.
But if we break down the functions even further, we find some surprising connections. For instance, blood production, something called hematopoiesis.
I would not have guessed this one.
Most people don't. It's actually a primary function of the skeletal system. It happens in the red bone marrow. It's a perfect example of how interconnected structure and function truly are.
Wow. Okay, so here's where we hit what is probably the most critical concept for survival: homeostasis.
The dynamic equilibrium
of the entire organism. So what is the working definition we absolutely need to have?
Homeostasis is defined as the relatively constant state that the body maintains.
Despite everything changing around it.
Exactly, despite constant fluctuations. And achieving this stability relies completely on the homeostatic feedback control loop.
And if we break down that loop, what are the three operational components? What's required for any controlled action?
Okay, so you need three things. A sensor or sensory mechanism to detect the change.
Right.
An integrating or control center, like the brain, to analyze the input and decide on the response. And then an effector mechanism, like a muscle or a gland, to actually carry out that corrective action.
Okay, that makes sense.
And an important note for your audience, the initial disruptor, the stressor stimulator, is not considered a component of the control mechanism itself.
Right. It's the trigger, not the response system. Now, we mostly talk about negative feedback, which reverses a change to restore balance.
That's the most common one, yes.
But the body also uses other specialized control mechanisms.
Absolutely. We see two main variations. First, something called feed-forward.
Okay.
This is where information flows ahead to trigger a change in anticipation of an event. Think about the smell of food triggering saliva production.
Before you've even taken a bite.
Before the food even enters your mouth, that's the body just getting ready.
And then there's control based on location, right?
Correct. You have intrinsic control mechanisms which operate locally, right, within the tissues or organs themselves. That's sometimes called autoregulation.
And the other type.
Then you have extrinsic control, which relies on the big regulatory systems, so the nervous and endocrine systems.
A classic example of that would be the hypothalamus in the brain acting as the body's thermostat.
That's the perfect example. It receives input and regulates core temperature across the entire system.
And while negative feedback is, the star of the show, we have to acknowledge positive feedback.
We do. It's rare but powerful. This mechanism actually intensifies a change, moving the system away from balance until a certain outcome is achieved.
The textbook example being the hormone oxytocin.
Exactly, causing increasingly powerful uterine contractions during labor until delivery is complete.
So, speaking of outcomes, the material brings up some important clinical connections, specifically how external factors can interact with an internal predisposition, like our genetics.
Yes. A genetic factor is simply an inherited trait that places an individual at a greater than normal risk for a disease.
Okay.
This concept helps frame conditions where an external agent, like the human papillomavirus or HPV, interacts with a person's cellular machinery to increase the risk of something like cervical cancer.
So it shows that interplay between environment, genetics, and cellular control.
Precisely.
All right, now we have to shift gears completely, but it's still fundamentally linked. You just cannot understand physiology without understanding some basic chemistry.
Not at all.
So let's start with the building blocks. Elements and compounds.
The key functional difference here is whether the substance can be simplified. An element cannot be broken down chemically into anything simpler. A compound is made of two or more elements joined together, and it can be broken down.
And for life to exist, inorganic molecules are essential. Water is number one. What specific properties make water so indispensable for us?
Well, water's key role is really rooted in its polarity, which makes it an incredible solvent, but also its thermal properties. High specific heat and high heat of vaporization.
And that high specific heat is what prevents sudden, catastrophic temperature changes in the body.
Exactly. It's a crucial thermal buffer. It's why we don't instantly boil when we get a fever. And it's important to note, strong acidity is not a characteristic property of water. It's neutral.
Which is essential.
Yes, for almost all biological reactions.
That neutrality leads us right into pH regulation and the body's chemical safety net.
That safety net is provided by things called buffers. So acids are proton donors. They release hydrogen ions. Bases accept them.
Okay.
Buffers are substances that maintain the constancy of pH by basically absorbing or releasing those hydrogen ions really quickly to prevent drastic shifts.
So they keep things stable. Let's move to the organic building blocks now, the biomolecules. Why is carbon so perfect as the molecular foundation of life?
Carbon is tetravalent. It can bond with 4 other atoms, and it often forms these carbon-carbon or carbon-hydrogen bonds. This versatility allows it to construct these vast, complex, sometimes gigantic macromolecules that we need.
Okay, let's focus on the workhorses then. Proteins.
Proteins are structurally and functionally just incredibly diverse. They're built from 20 commonly occurring amino acids.
Those are linked together by peptide bonds.
That's right. And proteins serve roles as hormones, antibodies for defense, and critically as enzymes. But we should note that fluids like urine, They're composed of waste products, but they're explicitly not categorized as proteins.
Good distinction. And what about the other main structural organic component, lipids?
Lipids are varied, but the most common ones we eat are triglycerides. Those are for energy storage.
And structurally?
Structurally, the most important lipids are phospholipids. They use their specialized hydrophilic and hydrophobic ends to form the essential bilayers of all our cell membranes.
Which brings us to how the cell actually manages all this chemistry, how it fuels the whole machine.
Right. Energy dynamics. This is metabolism in action. When we talk about breaking down larger, complex substances into simpler ones and releasing energy, or ATP, we are describing catabolism.
And that's the process that fuels everything the cell does.
Everything, from signaling to repair.
And moving all those materials across that phospholipid membrane you just mentioned, that requires two basic modes of transport.
Correct. Passive transport, which includes things like diffusion and osmosis, requires absolutely no cellular energy.
Because it's just going with the flow.
Exactly, down the concentration gradient. Conversely, active transport moves substances against the gradient, and that absolutely requires cellular energy to power the process.
So how do we get that energy from, say, glucose?
Through cellular respiration. This is the pathway that breaks glucose down into carbon dioxide and water, releasing ATP. It involves three main stages.
What are they?
First is glycolysis, which is anaerobic and happens out in the cytoplasm. Then the citric acid cycle, also known as the Krebs cycle. And finally, the high-yield electron transport system.
And none of this runs without the critical catalysts.
The enzymes. They are highly specific, acting upon molecules known as substrates. And for naming, which is important for content creators to know, the root name is almost always followed by the suffix -ase.
Okay, so what does this all mean? We've built the chemical and homeostatic foundation. But this resource, it extends into these massive physiological systems.
It does. It shows how these foundations translate to the macroscopic level.
Let's connect a few of these high-impact physiological facts then.
Sure. So once we master the cell, we move to the next level. Tissues. The body is built from four principal types: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous.
Each specialized for different functions.
Right, like protection, support, conduction. Understanding their specific organization is the key to understanding how a whole organ functions.
And the sheer power generated by these organized tissues is, well, it's incredible. I wanted to highlight that fact about the muscular system.
It's a remarkable illustration of efficiency. If all our muscles could coordinate and direct their power in one single vector, it's estimated the combined force would be enough to move 25 tons.
That's insane.
It is. But that power can also be a source of trouble, as we see in conditions like carpal tunnel syndrome.
Right, where repetitive strain causes inflammation,
Right.
leading to weakness and pain.
Exactly. And then you have the incredible speed of communication in the nervous system.
How fast are we talking?
A nerve impulse travels through a neuron and is transmitted to the next one in about 7 milliseconds.
Wow.
That rapid coordinated action is what allows for complex motor function and, immediate reactions.
And finally, our largest organ system, the skin and how damage is assessed.
The classification is all based on depth. A first-degree burn is superficial, only affecting the epidermis.
Okay.
A third-degree burn, or a full-thickness burn, is far more destructive. It destroys both the epidermis and the dermis, and might even involve underlying tissue.
And for a quick estimation of burn size, clinicians use the rule of palms.
That's right. The victim's own palm represents roughly 1% of their total body surface area. It's a quick field assessment tool.
This review really just underscores that mastering that anatomical language, the mechanisms of homeostasis, and the chemical fundamentals, it's essential preparation for everything else.
Absolutely. From muscle power to nerve speed to clinical diagnostics, these core principles are the lens you will use to interpret every system, every disease, and every therapy later on.
Okay, before we wrap up, let's try to consolidate your understanding of the most crucial concept, homeostasis. We use the example of Sam's blood glucose elevating sharply after a heavy meal. For the body to restore balance, I want you to identify the three specific essential functional components: the sensor, the integrating center, and the effector that form that classic feedback control loop.
And here's a final provocative thought that builds on this. The lifespan of most proteins is remarkably short, 2 days or less. That means our body is in a state of constant rebuilding. So consider this. What mechanism ensures that new proteins are synthesized correctly and that the ribosomes, the cellular machinery for this task, receive the precise, exact hereditary material they need every single time? Think about that essential connection between genetics and cellular construction.